and God asked if I would like to see his face. And I agreed. I had been looking at all these souls that I had been with previously. And so my attention, after I agreed, my attention was turned, and I was looking at a bright, it looked like a sun with millions and millions of faces. Like just countless souls were all together. They were like simultaneously part of God, and yet they maintained their individuality. And some of these souls came to the surface, and they like wished me well, and they welcomed me into existence. And essentially, they were significantly happier than I had been when I started out. They were just the happiness I couldn't even begin to describe. But basically, they had been through this process, and they were there to tell me, welcome. We can't wait for you to join us, because as I understand it, each and every soul is unique and irreplaceable, and each soul brings something to the total that nobody else could duplicate.
Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Yeah. Peace and praise the sun. Thank you all for being here today. You're going to hear a powerful episode from Aaron Green, who's had a near-death experience. Believe me when I say that this story has moved me, and I hope it moves you as well. Unfortunately, my audio was being picked up from my webcam and not my microphone, so my audio might sound weird in this episode, but please don't let that distract you from the powerful message that Aaron Green is sharing with us today. I am working on building one of the most high vibrational spiritual communities on this planet, but I need your help. If you would like to be a part of this growth, the cultivation of this tribe, the cultivation of this community, drop a sub, drop a comment, join the Discord, join the community, because I'm working on building something monumental here. If you're an experiencer of near-death experiences, if you have had past life regressions, if you're a channeler, psychic, medium, you've been abducted by aliens, whatever, I'm looking for those stories. So if you've had those experiences, or you know someone who's had those experiences, please connect me. Once again, this is a grassroots project, and I would love to reach out and talk to those people and have them on the show. But without further ado, here's Aaron Green. Welcome to the Praise the Sun podcast, where I am honored to have on my guest, Aaron Green. I am very honored to have this guest on to ask these questions about NDE experiences. They're some of the most fascinating things that are popping up into my life recently, and I'm just happy to have these guests on. So welcome to the show, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah. So, let's get right into it. Could you give us your NDE and how
Sure.
everything happened?
All right. So a little bit of background about myself first. I'm 48. I live in Virginia. I'm a engineer, married with 3 kids. I live in a typical house, suburban life. I'm just going through life, doing my thing. But when I was a kid, I had a pretty amazing experience that I wanted to talk about. Shortly before my 6th birthday, I was playing with some friends in a neighbor's backyard. We used to just go around the neighborhood before the internet and a lot of TV shows and all that. We would just kind of roam the neighborhood as a group and play and do all kinds of stuff. But one day I was just in a neighbor's backyard with my brother and maybe 6 other friends, something like that. And something happened, and I still don't know exactly what happened, but for some reason I couldn't breathe, and no matter what I did, I couldn't take a breath. I just I was struggling, and I started to walk away from my friends. I was going to try to go home and get some help, and I made it only 20 feet away from my friends, something like that. And I was continuing to struggle to breathe, and it triggered something for me. I didn't pass out or lose consciousness, but I actually left my body. My soul, or my essence, the what I really am, left my body, and I watched as my body fell to the ground. And I existed as like a just an orb of consciousness, and I felt more alive, more intelligent. It was kind of like waking up from a dream, only this physical life that I was living was the dream, and I was like back into a greater reality, a more real existence than what we currently experience as people. But I watched my body fall to the ground. I looked over at my friends, and they didn't really notice that my body was laying there, and they definitely didn't see me as just a consciousness. And a couple of things were readily apparent. One was that like there was something different about time. The flow of time was just not what we're used to. You know, we're so restricted by it here in this life, but you could just feel it that time itself somehow it works differently than what we're all used to here. And then almost immediately, my entire life, those almost 6 years of life flashed in front of me. I relived every experience that I had had up to that point in like complete detail. Nothing was left out. There was no secrets. Nothing was hidden. Every single thing that had happened to me, I re-experienced it. But the twist of this, which I think is really interesting, is not only did I have all the same feelings and thoughts that I had during those 6 years, but I could literally feel my parents' feelings and those around me. Um, I was able to feel how they had felt, how what I had done as a child influenced them, or how it affected them. And a couple of things really stood out. One was my mother's love for me. You know, that really there was like a significance to that love. It had a deeper meaning, and uh, there was something significant about that love. And then my father, he loved me too, and he was a good father. But what really stood out to me was his frustration and anger at at raising me as a child. And you know, I've got three kids now of my own, so I understand. You know, the crying, the dirty diapers, it can be aggravating. But I could literally feel that aggravation as I re-experienced that re-experienced my life during what I think people call a life review. And it also like was self evident that it wasn't my fault. Like I hadn't done anything wrong as a child. You know, just crying and having a dirty diaper. That's just what it is to be a little kid. And somehow that was self evident that I hadn't done anything wrong, even though I had kind of like caused this frustration for my father. But anyway, that was all over like in like a split second kind of thing. I was able to relive that full 6 years in complete detail in like a split second, or at least that's how it felt. And and I was just floating there, and I noticed in the distance there was a bright light, like a really distant light, but it had a significance and an importance to it. But I didn't focus on it or pay more attention to it. But I knew like instinctively that there was something really important about that light, but I didn't dwell on it. And I went back to focusing on where I was, what was going on, and I looked around, and where I was, I had been in a neighbor's backyard, which was like cleanly mowed grass. But here, as I was floating around, and I was still basically in the same spot, even though it's like I was in a parallel realm that's like parallel to this physical realm. Anyway, it still had grass and buildings, but like the grass was like unmowed and unkept. It was kind of like weedy, which I now think has something to do with my own spiritual, where I am spiritually at that time. That's kind of how I view it now. But anyway, it looked a little different, but it was obviously still looked like the earth that we're used to. Um, and I started to have some questions. You know, I was just floating there. I'm thinking, what am I? You know, it's obvious I'm not this human, this person, that I'm so much more than that. It was just self evident. And when I had that question, it's like I was able to see myself from the outside, and I was just a round orb of light and kind of like transparent. I could see into myself, and I just existed like that. But I was able to see what I looked like. At the time, it reminded me of an egg, you know, kind of round, and there was some stuff inside of it that I didn't understand. I still don't understand, but it's more than just a orb. Anyway, I then had another question. I wanted to know, well, where did I come from? And So this spiritual memory, something that I had previously experienced but had completely forgotten while I was living this life, it's like this memory replayed for me. And I saw, and I got an answer to my question in pretty extreme detail. So when I asked the question, where did I come from? So I relived this memory, and it started with I was around orb of light, and I was with hundreds or thousands of other orbs of light, and we all existed together in what I would call like a an ocean of light. Like we were all together. It was very bright. There was no no suffering, no pain, and there never could be. Like it was a very safe environment. We were all happy and warm and content, and we interacted with each other. And it was great, but we were all ignorant, and we didn't know anything. We had no experience. We had no uh, background to understand what was going on. But we just kind of existed like that. And periodically, we would get some kind of treat or a gift that would come down, and everybody would get one of these things. As a kid, I thought of it like a cookie, and one and we would get these, and everybody was happy. Somehow it made us a little bit happier. And one time, there was one fewer gift than there were souls in this group, and I made the conscious decision that all these other souls, they're just like me, and they want this gift too. So I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up my gift so that someone else can have one, and I would be the soul that doesn't get any one of these gifts. And when the last soul got the last gift, I was very gently lifted up out of this sea of souls, um, like very gently, and the care that was taken to lift me up was really noticeable. Um, and a higher level consciousness contacted me, like mind to mind communication. I think they call it telepathic communication, and I could feel that this was a very powerful, intelligent, wise entity that had contacted me. And I was told that this entity, which I'll call God, was my creator, and that they had made me, and that what I had done when I gave up what I wanted for those around me was very important, and that meant that I was ready for the next phase of my existence. Like I was ready for to start something. And um, God was loving to me, kind and compassionate, and very caring. And the, uh, the love that I felt is hard to express, but it was just extreme. And God was just absolutely wonderful. Like I could feel all that. And basically, God explained that in order for me to enjoy my existence, like God had created a wonderful experience for me, an existence for me that was fantastic. But in order for me to really enjoy it, I needed to go through like a growth process to develop me and make me into a soul that could appreciate and understand all this stuff that God had in store for me. As an ignorant soul with no experience, I couldn't appreciate all this stuff. And I asked the question, well, couldn't you just change me and make me however I need to be so I could appreciate this existence? And God answered, yes, absolutely. God was fully capable of changing me to make me however God wanted to be, but that there was like a core or fundamental reason for our creation that involved free will. Like God intended for us to have free will, and it was extremely important for the whole nature of our existence that we have free will, and that if God changed me forcibly or made me the way I was supposed to be, it would violate the free will and therefore negate like the entire purpose of our creation. So I said, okay, I understand. That made sense to me. And the confidence that God had for this plan was palpable. It was God was extremely confident that this plan that was developed for my growth and education was worthwhile, and that it was a good idea. And so, it all seemed good to me. I was agreeing with what God said, and basically the gist of it was that God is loving, kind, compassionate, honest, and in order for us to enjoy the creation that God has created for us, we need to freely um, uh, adapt those same kind of characteristics. We need to freely choose to be loving, kind, compassionate, honest, nice. We need to freely have those same characteristics in order for us to be able to enjoy what God has in store for us. And God has a way, uh, or had developed a training for us that would um, basically guarantee that we would grow in terms of all those traits. Love, kindness, compassion, honesty, that sort of thing. And I agreed. God asked if I was willing to go through this, and God understood that it would be difficult, but from God's perspective, it would be very, very brief, like so short. We'll get all the unpleasant parts of our existence out of the way right off the bat, and then we can enjoy our existence for an eternity. And it sounded like a great deal to me. And so I agreed to it, and God was very, very pleased with me that I was agreeable, that I agreed to do, go through this process. And God asked if I would like to see his face. And I agreed. I had been looking at all these souls that I had been with previously. And so after I agreed, my attention was turned, and I was looking at a bright, it looked like a sun with millions and millions of faces. Like just countless souls were all together. They were like simultaneously part of God, and yet they maintained their individuality. And some of these souls came to the surface, and they like wished me well, and they welcomed me into existence. And essentially, they were significantly happier than I had been when I started out. They were just the happiness I couldn't even begin to describe. But basically, they had been through this process, and they were there to tell me, welcome. We can't wait for you to join us, because as I understand it, each and every soul is unique and irreplaceable, and each soul brings something to the total that nobody else could duplicate. And so they were excited that eventually I was going to join them, and I would bring something to their happiness that no other soul could replicate. And when I joined them, it would even increase their happiness even a little bit more than how happy they currently were. And so I said, okay, that all sounds good. And then God asked me if I was sure. Asked me again, are you sure you're ready to do this? And I agreed. And it's like that. I was shot out. Um, I left that realm, or that place at an extreme speed, and I was like zooming to somewhere else. And God was still like contacting me mentally, and we started looking at all these different planets I could go to, all these different physical experiences that I could have to grow me the way I needed to be grown, to get the kind of experience necessary for my education. And we looked at thousands and thousands of different planets and different, I guess, kind of life I could be. I don't remember any details of what all these different planets or lives look like, but there was a multitude of options for me. But somehow, when we saw Earth, there was something about Earth that really appealed to me, and I was just absolutely sure that this was the place for me, that this is where I wanted to come. And with that, God asked me if I was sure. Anytime I made a decision like this that would impact my experience, I was always asked, "Are you sure?" And it was like, once you agree and you give your final answer, then that's set. It's done. You've made the decision, and at that point, you can't go back again. But I agreed, and I was sure that I was willing to come to this place, and this was where I wanted to have my adventure. And so with that memory ended, and I was back to floating next to my body, just kind of aimlessly wandering around my neighbor's backyard. And that whole reliving of that experience it didn't take like any time at all. It was very quick, but it was extremely detailed. And then I started to have more questions, and as I would have more questions, I'd have more answers come to me, or I would remember something from like a spiritual memory would come to me, something I had previously experienced. Anyway, I had the question, okay, well, why am I Aaron Green? Why am I having this experience? Why am I living this life? And again, I had a memory, something that I had been through, kind of like replay for me. And I was with some guides that were guiding me. They were helping me prepare for the life I was going to lead. And these guides had a body that they wanted me to or they thought would be a good fit for me. And they showed me this life I was going to lead, and it was like I would have been an angry person. And I think as a child I would have had a very difficult, like dysfunctional kind of family, something like that maybe. I'm not exactly sure, but somehow I would have been a very angry person. Like my entire life would have been dominated by anger, and I completely rejected that life. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And they respected my choice, and somehow I knew that some other soul would choose that life and that it would help them. But I had trouble understanding why someone would pick that, even though I knew someone eventually would pick that life. And of course, for a different soul to live that life, it would end up being a little bit differently than if I had lived it. But either way, that baby was going to be born, and someone was going to choose that life. Anyway, we looked at another set of parents that I could be born to, and this seemed like a better fit for me. I liked it better, and initially I wanted to be a girl because I felt like girls were less violent, and I was concerned that maybe I would hurt somebody during my life. And spiritually, it's bad to hurt other people. That's bad for you spiritually, and I knew that. It was just it was one of those things that's really obvious. And I felt like if I was a girl, I wouldn't hurt anyone. I would be less likely to. And I also saw that these parents had the genes, like I could be a redheaded girl. And it was self-evident that red hair is kind of rare. There's not a lot of people with it. And that really appealed to me. I liked it that it was an unusual hair color, and I wanted to be a girl. And I thought, okay, I want to be a redheaded girl. So we started looking at the genetics available to these parents, and there was something about the genes. There weren't quite enough options available to fit with my personality, and somehow it didn't quite fit right. And so um, I wouldn't have been able to lead the kind of life I wanted to lead. So we started looking at, okay, well, what about the boys available to these parents? And so at first I wanted to be a redheaded boy, but there was almost no genes available to these parents for a redheaded boy. So we started looking at brown haired boys, and there was oodles and oodles of choices for brown haired boys. There was lots of different options to pick from about what this body would look like. And so we started looking at the options. And at first, I wanted to be extremely good looking, like one of the best looking guys on the planet. And those parents, they had those genes available to them. But my guides pointed out, basically, if you're an extremely good looking person, where you are with your spiritual development, you're going to be like, women are going to treat you differently. And you're not going to be able to resist this kind of temptation. And essentially, I would have been promiscuous. I would have had a lot of partners, if you get my drift. And there was a spiritual downside to that. And it was my choice whether or not I wanted to do that. But recognizing the spiritual downside of being too promiscuous, I passed on it. I like, okay, I don't want that. And so we chose, or I chose, kind of like I scaled down the attractiveness to still reasonably attractive, but nothing extraordinary. And when I got to the right level, what I thought was right for me, I picked that level of attractiveness. And then we looked at intelligence, and I wanted to be like the smartest guy on the planet, like an Albert Einstein type of thing, or Aristotle, something like that. And those parents, they had those genes. I could have been, one of the smartest guys on the planet. But my guides kind of pointed out again. They were like, okay, well, yes, you can pick that, absolutely. But if you do, you're going to be arrogant. You're going to look down on other people because they're not as smart as you. You're going to be an atheist, and you're kind of going to be a loner because you're going to have trouble connecting with other people. And for me, it was really the atheist thing that I didn't like. But I could easily see the downsides of being extremely intelligent for me. And so likewise, I back the intelligence down to a smart person, but nothing extraordinary. I'm no Albert Einstein or anything like that. Uh, and when we had what I considered to be the right intelligence, then we started looking at other attributes. And I looked at this body and I knew pretty much everything about it down to the most intimate detail. There was some details with the teeth, like I knew how good my teeth would be. I knew all kinds of stuff, what this body was going to be like. Like I had a perfect picture of what I was getting myself into as far as this body goes. And it was my choice. No one was forcing me. But I chose what I thought was the right body for me. And when all the decisions were made, as far as this body goes, my guides, they started looking at what my life would be like. And they had some plans for me for things that would happen during my life that would be helpful to me in my spiritual development and necessary for me to progress towards the kind of soul I was working to become. And they showed me they showed me some stuff. And one thing they showed me was they showed me a snidbit or like a brief clip from some previous lives that I had lived. And one of the clips they showed me was I had been kind of a bigger, stronger guy, and I had beaten up this other guy. I beat him up pretty bad, and I took it too far during this previous life, and I hurt this guy, and I shouldn't have. And in order for me to learn my lesson or it was kind of like I had written a check in a previous life, and now it was time for me to cash it, or I had some unbalanced karma, I'm an engineer, so I like to think of equations. It was like there was one side of an equation, and now I had to balance out that equation. But however you want to look at it, I had some unresolved issues there from that fight that needed to be resolved in this lifetime. And so they had planned out that I would have my nose broken as a teenager, that this would be something that was necessary for my development. And I needed to agree to it. Like they couldn't just force it on me. But I knew that it would be beneficial to me in my development, so I agreed to it. And then, likewise, they showed me another, um, like a short clip from a previous life I had lived, where I had hurt another guy. I, I, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but I think I had like cut this guy's arm off. Okay, um, I hurt him, and he didn't deserve it, and you know, anyway, I had mistreated this guy, and now it was my time to get that karma. And I was shown that I would dislocate this shoulder as a teenager, and then I would break and dislocate my other shoulder as an adult. But I needed to agree to that, and I was shown that the shoulder that got broken, the medical technology would be sufficient to fix the shoulder, and it wouldn't interfere with my life after that. Um, and so I agreed to it. And there was other things that they showed me a little brief clip from a previous life, and like this life was a time for me to resolve some of that stuff, and there was good stuff and bad stuff mixed in there together to set the stage for some of the plans that were being planned out for this life. And I was told and shown that I would always have my free will, like I could always make whatever decisions I wanted, but that there was these things that I agreed to, like they would have a way of kind of like making it come into making it happen. But I needed to agree to it in order for them to be able to make it happen to me. They couldn't just force it on me. So anyway, I agreed to a number of different things, and they had a basic plan for this life. And then they showed me other people that I would interact with in life. Some of the people that I was meant to have an impact on their life, or they were meant to have an impact on my life. And there was agreements that were made. Um, there was souls that I was going to, um, you know, I was going to play a key part in their life, or they were going to play a key part in my life. And some of these relationships were planned out, and I got to see that stuff getting planned out. And some of this stuff I needed to agree to. They weren't going to force any of this on me, but I agreed to a number of different things that were going to happen in my life. And some of them involved hardships, but the reason I would agree to some of this stuff is because it would help me in my development, and it would help other people in their development. So anyway, after I agreed to this stuff, we took another look at the parents I was going to live or be born to. I had a really good understanding of what kind of people they were, what kind of souls they were, where they were on their spiritual development. I knew that I was going to have a brother, what our relationship would be like. My guides, they kind of pointed out that this father, that he was kind of angry. Okay, he was prone to anger, and he would be I don't want to say abusive because he was a good father, but he was definitely angry and yelled at us more than he needed to as I was growing up. And my guides showed me all this, but there was other stuff about this father that I liked, and um, I agreed that this was still the family I wanted to be born into. And so when we had made all these decisions, one last time the guides showed me basically this life I was going to lead in totality, what everything looked like. And they asked me a final time, are you sure that you agree to this? And I was like, yes, I agree. And when I gave that final agreement, then it's like, well, the decision is made. I've now committed to live this life. And I saw spiritually what the conception looked like, not the physical act from my parents, but from the spiritual side, what it looked like when this body was formed. And it was a really beautiful thing. And it was like significant. And, I was happy to see this body be formed that I was going to be part of. And then that was kind of like the end of that memory. And I was back to floating next to my body. And then I had questions, well, what happens to us after we're done living this life? And I was shown a number of different realms that souls go to. I first saw a realm where there was very unhappy souls, and they had been like violent in their life, and they had wanted to hurt others. And when they died, they have free will, and they continued to have a violent mindset and want to hurt others. And so they were all fighting with each other. It was a horrible like endless battle, or not endless, but it was a horrible battle where they just kept fighting with each other over and over again. And the way they looked on the outside, in this life, uh, a really beautiful person could have an ugly inside. But in the afterlife, it's not like that. How they look in the afterlife is directly related to how they are inside as a soul. And so these souls in this horrible realm, they looked like monsters, and they were continuously fighting with each other. But no matter how bad they would hurt each other or injure or wound each other, they would quickly heal and get better. But they just kept fighting each other and slashing and cutting each other just over and over again. It was really horrible, and they were miserable. But eventually, one of these souls stopped fighting with those around it. It decided it made the decision. No one forced it. It decided that it was going to stop fighting with the other souls around it. And when that soul made that decision, there was like an angel or a being of light that swooped in from above and pulled it out of this horrible fight. And I was told that soul that had been fighting, that they had a way for it to continue its progression. That it would essentially it would be coming back to Earth again, and it would be able to make different choices or different decisions. But having been through this horrible experience, it would have like an internal desire not to hurt others, not to fight with others. It had gained some education by going through that horrible experience. Anyway, I was shown other realms kind of like that weren't nearly as bad. One, the souls were just kind of wandering around aimlessly in darkness, and they weren't miserable, but they weren't happy either. And I saw that there was like higher level souls or beings of light that had like come down to this level because they wanted to help those that were there. They wanted to help them progress and help them to move to a happier place. but they couldn't force these souls to move or do something differently. They had to get their agreement. But eventually, I saw one of the souls that had been just kind of wandering around in darkness. It agreed to accept this help, and when it did, it was able to move on and continue its progression. And there was a number of different realms, kind of like that, where there was like unhappy souls. But in each of these realms, I also witnessed one of these souls leave. Like none of them were stuck forever. They were all going to be able to get out and eventually move on and continue their progression. And then I started to see happier realms. One of the realms I saw, it looked it looked very much like Earth. You know, it had streets and buildings, and I remember specifically this one lamppost I looked at. And the souls, they were happy. They were content. It was kind of like being on Earth, but much happier. And then I saw realms where souls were, way happier than they are on Earth, all the way up to what I considered to be the highest realm, which were these souls that had done they were done with this journey, and they were like with God, and they were just ridiculously happy. I couldn't even describe that kind of happiness. But I saw very clearly there was multiple different levels or realms, whatever you want to call it, and every soul, when they leave this life, depending on their internal characteristics, what they're like, that kind of dictates where they go. It's not like anyone's forcing them to go to one realm or another, but it's like they just end up with others like themselves. And if you're a hateful, violent person and you're going to be with others just like you, that's not a good experience. But if you're a loving, kind, compassionate person and you're with others like you, that's a good experience. That's going to be nice. Um, so I saw a number of different realms that souls go to, and one of these realms, somehow I understood that, like, I was going to go to this realm when I was done with this life. It was a happy realm. It was kind of like a city of light, and that I guess that's where I expected. I don't know. Somehow it seemed like that's where I was going to go after this life. And I remembered that I had friends, souls that I knew and connected with, and friends in the spiritual realm. They can kind of like merge together and almost become like one soul. They can kind of like overlap their consciousnesses. On Earth we have like a sexual merger that can take place that's good, but on the spiritual realm there's like a much deeper connection that souls can make, where they almost like overlap with each other. It, it's really a significant, and it's much happier than the sexual merger that we know of, here on this realm. Anyway, I remembered some of this stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get back there. I'm so done with this life. And almost as soon as I started thinking like that, there was like a being of light or an angel that came at me at great speed. And it essentially said, you are not to leave your body. It was kind of like I was being chastised. Like the breathing problem that I had, I get the feeling it should not have been enough that I left my body. Like that spiritually, I think it was almost like I had bent a rule. I don't know. Anyway, when it said you're not to be back at you're not to leave your body, it's like, bam, I was back in my body. And I stood up, and I was confused. And at that point, my brother had come over to check on me because he had seen my body just laying there. And I got up and I went home, and I tried to explain the situation to my mom, but as a almost 6-year old, I just couldn't explain it. It was just way too much. But I would think about this experience daily, like all the time, all this different stuff I had seen, and try to understand it. And after maybe 6 months, something like that, I was contacted by my guides. Like, I knew exactly who it was. They contacted me mentally or through telepathy, and it was just obvious who it was because I remembered them. And they essentially told me that they needed to hide this experience from me, that it was interfering with my ability to live life as intended. But they couldn't just hide it. They needed my agreement. They needed me to agree to have it hidden. And they explained that it was interfering with my life, and that having this experience would prevent me from ever developing faith. Because I had seen all this stuff, I couldn't develop faith because I've already seen it. But they explained that faith is very important, and it'll be to your benefit if we hide this experience. And so I agreed. And after that, I didn't think about this experience anymore. And I went through life, and I had my nose broken as a teenager. I had no idea that I had agreed to that. Um, and I remember, I realized that I could hold on to a lot of hostility for this kid that broke my nose, but that I needed to forgive him. And I forgave him, and I now recognize that forgiving someone was very powerful for me spiritually. Like, it was a benefit to me to be able to forgive this kid who broke my nose. And then I dislocated my shoulder, and then I dislocated and broke the other shoulder. And I went through all that stuff. I got married, had 3 kids, and then about 12 years ago, I was reading a newspaper article I'm sorry, a magazine article from the magazine Newsweek magazine, and they had a article about Eben Alexander, who's a near death experiencer. He was a neurosurgeon, and basically he had been brain dead while his body was hooked up to all these monitors. And as a neurosurgeon, he explained, hey, I couldn't have this experience in my brain because I'm brain dead. But during his near death experience, he saw all kinds of stuff, and he wrote a book about it. Anyway, something about reading that article triggered for me what I think is called a spontaneous recall. I remembered all this stuff that I'd forgotten since I was a kid. It basically all came back to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I remembered all this stuff that I hadn't thought about in 30 years. And so that was about 12 years ago. And I've been trying to come to terms with what I had seen and what it means for my life, and just try to share this experience, share what had happened to me, so that other people can maybe put a couple of these pieces together. I view understanding the afterlife and God as like a giant puzzle. And, we try to put all these puzzle pieces together, and the more we get in there, the more clear of a picture emerges. And I feel like I've got a couple puzzle pieces that I just want to share with others. So that's the gist of what my experience was like.
Wow, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Yeah, take a take a drink of water because
Yeah, sorry, I was talking a lot.
but that was fascinating. That was wonderful. I have questions myself. Let me drink some water too. Okay, so I'm try to because I was jotting down everything as you was talking. So, what do you feel is the correlation of the eye color with the personality set? If there is one, maybe there wasn't. I guess I thought there was one based off what you were saying. But like, is there a personality trait with the eye color and the hair color? Because I remember you said you wanted to be a redhead girl, and that was because that was rare. But is there any type of like personality that comes with that, with the hair or in the eye color, or?
Uh, no, it was more like I mean, not for me, not what I saw. It was more like there weren't enough there weren't enough genes available to these parents to get the body that I really needed to express myself fully as a person. Like, I would have had to look a little different, or uh, be taller or shorter or something, be a little different than what I would want from life. And somehow it just didn't quite fit right between my soul and the redheaded girl body that these parents could make. That there was something that wasn't quite right with it. That's why I passed on it.
Mm, okay, I understand now. Okay. Um, so from what you remember, are there any type of lessons that the different genders tend to might have? Like there might be a lesson that men try to learn more than versus women. Because I remember you were preferring to be a woman because they're less likely
Right.
to hurt someone. Is it that people who usually incarnate as men they tend to have that since we have higher testosterone? Are we more
Right.
likely to end up being more aggressive or something like that? So that's a lesson that we end up having to learn of how to balance that, or yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know exactly. Like, it was obvious to me that men are just more violent, and that was something I was concerned about. Um, I think we all have our own lessons to learn, and the particulars. I think men and women are a little, our lives are a little bit different, and our challenges are a little bit different. But I don't know exactly, what that looks like, or what the overall meaning is behind that. For me personally, I at that time I was just trying to avoid hurting other people.
Okay, I understand that. That makes sense. Okay, so From your experience of before you were incarnating, do you feel like we're incarnating into stories or timelines that already exist? When you were viewing that lifetime, you were able to see, the progression of it. So, are we incarnating into stories or lifetimes that already exist, or is it that we incarnate and then things play out, and it plays out in a kind of a possibility of things?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. We always maintain our free will, but I think it seems like a contradiction. How do we maintain our free will, but we like agree to stuff before we come to this? And I think the trick there that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around is that on the spiritual side of things, time doesn't exist the same way it does for us here as we live life. So we can spiritually we can agree to stuff, and because they're not trapped by time by like the way we are. We're not interfering with our own free will, or we're not violating any kind of um, restrictions that seem like they would be. But what I saw was that free will is very important, and that we always maintain our free will and our ability to make our own decisions, and that nothing's going to change that. Although the stuff we have agreed to, we're kind of like bound to that agreement once we make them.
That makes a lot of sense because I remember you saying that free will was like really
Right.
integral towards this. So it's like, and it would make sense that you can kind of plan for certain things, but ultimately you do need that free will so that
Uh-huh.
various. It makes sense that everyone has free will, so they kind of creates this sort of randomness of things that are happening that
Right.
maybe God couldn't even predict that would happen, which is probably
Well,
fascinating for
well,
you.
I think the key thing there that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around is that God's not restricted by time, and on the spiritual side, it's like there is no time. Everything is like all together, and so they're able to see this whole life and this whole world, these thousands and thousands of years that people have been around. They're able to see it differently because, like to God, it's all one, or it's all merged together. So I think if you can try to understand that, I think that helps make it seem more reasonable that we can maintain our free will, even though some things seem like they're uh, set in stone ahead of time.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. When you were reviewing the past lives that you experienced, were these lifetimes that existed before you were in that collective consciousness with all those hundreds of thousands of souls and stuff like that? Like, did you
No,
like?
after that time.
Okay.
So after I
Yeah.
came to Earth, but before I became Aaron Green, before I became this person.
Okay. Okay. Because I was trying to get a bit of a timeline for
Right.
like how things like if that would be like a location that because I remember you were saying there are different locations that people go to, so I wasn't sure if that was like a location that people also kind of coalesce and mingle at.
Right. Right.
Um, so from your experience, are we uh, like created from the essence of God itself?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's pretty much what's going on. We're all like little pieces of God, and we start out ignorant, and somehow we go through the experiences and we grow and learn and mature, and then we go back to God. But when we go back to God, we're like fully able to understand and appreciate the wonderful existence that is in store for us. But yeah, the way I see it, we're all like little pieces of God.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So as did you ever feel like you remembered the process of kind of being created from God, like the how a soul maybe even is created from that source self?
Uh, yeah, I don't really understand that part. Like, how does God break off a little piece of himself to create us? I don't know, but I like that's how I view it. I think we're, a little piece of God going on a crazy adventure, and eventually we're going to go back to God. But no, I don't have anything to add other than what I told you about what I remember. Like that's what it felt like. I was an immature, inexperienced little round orb, and now I've going on these adventures, and I'm learning and growing and developing into hopefully the kind of soul I need to be, so I can go back to the good stuff and eventually be done with this place.
Yes. And how are your experiences that you're and the lessons that you're learning on this planet? How do they help the whole? Because I remember you're saying like they were excited for you to come back
Right.
because when you come back, it's something that benefits the whole. So like, how does that help them?
Yeah, somehow like they can understand and appreciate our experiences too. Like we're living these lives, but uh, we feel like we have secrets, and like there's stuff you don't know about me, and I don't know about you. But when we get back to the spiritual side, those secrets and those hidden things, like that's all gone. It's all like public information. Everybody can see everybody else clearly, down to like the kind of thoughts you have. None of that stuff is actually hidden. And I think all those experiences and all that wisdom that we gain by being here, all that comes back to God and to everyone else, and somehow it helps complete this picture and helps make everything better. I don't fully understand, but somehow it does. Somehow it benefits everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I can understand that, like how our each individual experiences from different perspective can just go back to the God source, and it gains wisdom
Yeah.
and kind of is able to put together like a picture of the different experiences. So that makes sense to me. Um, so I'm just reading my questions. Okay, so when you were looking at the different planets, and I remember you said that you didn't remember, too many details, but
Right.
I
Right.
figured I might as well ask anyway. But did you notice any of the terrains, any of the races that were on the planets, or the creatures, how they looked, or any possible names, or anything about anything
Uh,
that stood out?
no, I wish I did. I mean, I'm picturing something like from Star Wars, but I don't know. I don't remember. Um, I get the impression that it's not all. It's not all exactly like humans. Just look at this planet and all the different life on this planet. And my speculation is that it's even wilder and crazier on other planets. Just all the different life forms out there. Um, I think it's an extreme multitude of differences. But you asked about race. There was one thing I saw like a lot of little, almost like clips or um, like a little snidbits that it's like, wow, that's really interesting. But one thing I saw about race that I think is interesting is that there's souls that are going to be that are one race, and they hate other races, right? And then they get back to the spiritual realm, and they feel like the race that they had been, like the reason they hated others was because something about that specific race. So they'll want to be a different race, and they'll come back as a different race, and they'll still hate other races. And that, like, there are souls that'll be different races, and they'll go through multiple iterations, and they still hate other races. And it's not that easy. Like we've got to learn to love and accept others regardless of their race or other issues going on. And each soul has to come through that. And it's not just magically easy for one race over another race. Like we all have the same difficulty there. It's all something we got to overcome in order to continue our progression. But that was something specifically I saw that I thought was interesting. Was these souls, they'd be one race, and then they'd be like, well, let me go be that other race. It'll be a lot easier. And then they do, and they're like, oh, but it's not easier. They still have that same struggle, and they still got to learn to love and accept each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that I've heard that way too many times from different clients that I had when I was doing past life regressions for them. And
Okay.
they currently are a woman and they had experience of a past life as a man,
Uh-huh.
and all these different things of the lessons. Like if they end up hating a woman, they'll incarnate as a woman and see how
Okay.
it is. And if they end up
Right.
hating a man, they incarnate as a man. And and it's just like, there's no need to hate any gender or any
Yeah.
race.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so so now that you've had that experience of receiving your memories back, how do you balance the the life of like being a human? We go through life as a day to day as a human, but you have this fundamental truth within inside of you of like
Right.
my true existence, my true essence is beyond what you see in the mirror. Like how do you balance that? Because
Right.
that's definitely something I've struggled with after having memories and stuff come back to
Oh
me.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I struggle with that. I'm like, you know, what am I doing here on this planet? There's better places or better realms I could be in. But really, what I try to focus on, and I'm not perfect, but what I try to focus on is, well, I've got a tremendous opportunity here because I do kind of understand how things work, and I I can make the most of this opportunity by being good to others, helping other people where I can, engaging of acts of service, trying to be honest with others. If I can live a loving life with the time I have left and help those around me and try to make this world a little bit better, then it'll be worthwhile. It'll be beneficial to me and it'll be beneficial to all those around me. And so I try to focus on that and think, okay, well, how can I make this world a better place? How can I help those around me? How can I show love and kindness and how can I just help progress this whole planet a little bit further into the godly characteristics that I know we all need to develop. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not always successful, but that's my goal, and I figure that's the best I could do.
And you're doing a great job, Aaron. You really are, blessed and thankful that people have these experiences that they can share. And speaking of that, as people get older, they do, and they never had these experiences, they do fear death. And
Right.
is there anything that you can say towards those people who like this visceral fear of death and stuff like that? Is there anything that any guidance that you can give for them?
Yeah. I mean, I would focus on the fact that God created this whole situation and experience that we're all going through, and God loves us. Okay, God really, really loves us and cares about us deeply, and that at the end of the day, God's in charge. God's running this whole show, and God wants us to be happy and to enjoy our existence. And even though we might go through some hardships in the meantime to get there, eventually what God has planned out, that's going to come to pass, and nothing's going to change that. And that, you know, eventually we're all going to be in a much better realm, much happier, and that it's going to be wonderful. And I know it could be scary for people uh, facing facing death and the unknown, but what I saw is that being born is the hard part. Like that's difficult, and dying is actually pretty easy for the vast majority of souls out there. If you've lived a life of hate and murdering others and hurting other people, then maybe you're not going to have a good death experience. But for most people, it's actually going to be fantastic to get out of this body. Like I was almost 6 years old, and I was in a healthy body, no problems or anything. And it was great to be outside of that body. It was great to leave it. I'm not encouraging anybody to leave prematurely. Okay, I don't mean it that way, but I mean when it's your time, then it's really not a bad thing. It's nothing to fear. It's nothing painful. It's actually pretty nice. It's being born that's difficult. That's who you need to feel sorry for, is the souls being born, because it's a difficult transition. Leaving the spiritual realm and coming into this body. Um, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking like, and I was writing this down. So what do you feel like is the differences energetically in that state that you were in? Like, is how different is it just being pure soul, no container? Like, does it feel like a very expansive type energy, and then you kind of
Right.
get, you get the human body, and it's kind of like compressed, or how? What are the
Right.
differences if you remember?
Yeah, there's a couple things in there that I think are pretty interesting. One is every soul's got like its own vibration to it, and as we progress and we become more loving, we get kind of like a higher and higher vibration, and you can like feel your vibration, and it's really interesting. If a soul goes to a higher level vibration than what they're naturally at, it's like it's very uncomfortable for them. It's uncomfortable. They don't like it, and they want to go back to their own level. And if a soul is at a higher vibration and it goes down to a lower vibration, it's like it can do that, but it loses some of its intelligence and happiness. And so it's kind of like it's not as pleasant of a form of existence. But um, as I see it in the spiritual realm, we are much more ourselves. We have a greater degree of freedom. We don't have the kind of restrictions that we do in life. Like if you want to go killing other people or hurting other people, it's a lot easier as a soul. You can do exactly what you want. Or if you want to love others and be kind to others, it's easier to do that as a soul. But it's far more difficult to change yourself in the spiritual realm. It's harder to move from one vibration to another. Um, and so I think the core difference from being here to being in the spiritual realm is the degree of freedom that we have. And you can really appreciate and enjoy that freedom if you're a loving soul that wants to do good to others. Or, likewise, you can suffer from the pain that you want to exert on others if you have that kind of mindset. So anyway, I think the big difference is the degree of freedom that we have in the spiritual realm, and then the ability to change ourselves that we have in this physical realm. I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. The freedom of expression versus here. I mean, we have a lot of laws and stuff that you kill someone, you go to jail and stuff. But I'm sure it's much more different on the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Um, and these are my last few questions. Were you able to see any future versions of Earth that were just kind of
Right.
different? Do we become more loving people or anything like that?
I hope so. What I saw as far as the future was I saw specific people, like how they would feel about their life when they left their life, like how they would view the life that they had lived. And so for individuals, like I saw um, what they how they viewed their personal life, and the people that were loving and kind, their future was a lot better than those who had been self-centered or had hurt other people. But as far as overall Earth and what's going to happen in the future, I didn't see. I don't have any specific knowledge. But one thing I did see was that these futures that people see, and I saw some futures about my own life, like they're potential futures. And so I think any person, if you're shown the future during a near death experience, you're not necessarily shown the future, you're shown a potential future. And that with all our free will, we all have the ability to improve and make things better. So I don't think that we're necessarily stuck for some kind of horrible future or some kind of wonderful future, but it's up to us to build that and hopefully build a better future for this planet and everybody on it.
Brilliant. And I'm glad you said that because that was actually my last question was that since you've had this experience, has there been any new abilities or psychic abilities or intuitive downloads or
Right.
anything that was extrasensory that you now have access to?
Uh, well, not exactly. I feel like we all have guides that are helping us, and that I think sometimes our guides are kind of trying to push us one way or another, and that if we're sensitive and we're open to that, that we can receive that help, and that anyone could do it. We can receive that help and accept their suggestions or listen to our intuition and go in an easier path. But as far as any other abilities, like I know some people, they get some pretty amazing gifts out of this kind of experience, but I don't think I have anything, any special abilities or intuitions beyond what everybody else does. But I think what I have is the knowledge that, hey, in order to live a good life, I just need to be loving, kind, compassionate, honest, respectful, forgiving, all those godly traits that uh, I need to live that life. That's how I need to behave myself. That's what I view as the gift that I have, is just that knowledge of how to live a good life.
How to live a good life. I love that. Um, Beautifully said, Aaron. These are my last two questions I usually ask all the guests. What does
Okay.
the sun represent to you?
The sun. Okay, to me, based on my experience, I think. Well, I was shown and told pretty clearly that this physical reality that we're in right now, it's like an ugly reflection of the spiritual reality, and so everything, every trait, every concept, all of it has like a spiritual counterpart that's much more pure and real and meaningful. But I view the sun in this physical realm as a kind of like an ugly reflection of the and think about how important the sun is to our existence here on earth. I think about in the spiritual realm, it's kind of like the same thing, but the sun represents God, and that here on earth we're nothing without the sun. Like we just would kind of like freeze and die. And I think in the spiritual realm, it's similar. We're nothing without God, and we need God for pretty much everything. And then my size as a person compared to the physical size of the sun is a pretty good representation as me as a soul compared to the spiritual essence of God. It's like I'm just a little tiny piece, right? I'm small compared to God, and so to me, that's what I think of the sun. It's like a physical reminder of the power of the of God in the spiritual realm.
Yes, beautifully said. And lastly, what does love mean to you? What is the definition of
Okay.
love?
To me, love is the desire to do good for others or another. The love is such a broad concept, but I think for me, love is like kindness, compassion, honesty, respect, acts of service, forgiveness, acceptance. To me, God is all those. Or, I'm sorry, love is all those things. Um, how we actively apply our love to trying to help those around us. That's how I view love.
And I agree right there with you. And thank you so much for your time, Arian. Thank you so much for your story. And thank you so much for everything that you have done, are doing, and will continue to do for the planet. Um, I'm sure I was in the collective just cheering you on as well. Obviously, I'm here as well, but I'm sure an aspect of me was there as like, go, Aaron, go. So thank you
Yeah,
so
well,
much.
thank you for giving me the chance to share my experience, and hopefully something I've said helps somebody. And I really admire and appreciate what you're doing with your channel. I think it's great.
Thank you so much. And if anything, your story has impacted me greatly. So there you have it. At least that's me that I'm directly telling you. Like I appreciate your time, your story, and even just hearing you talk on other platforms. I was like, wow, this is really hitting core to me. So I'm just thankful that for everything. So thank you so much for your time,
All
man.
right. Yeah. Thank you.